If in Alice in Wonderland the bottle said drink me, well, these journals today definitely say touch me. Today we're making tactile journals, and you can do it with or without printables. The cover's made from used envelopes, but the image each time has this amazing texture. We're using patchwork style stitches, and when you decorate it, it's just beautifully squidgy. You'll want to touch it. I'll show you exactly how to create this in today's tutorial, and I've been having fun making samples in lots of styles and different colours. The process steps and patchwork sewing tips are here and at the end of the video. You can find these in Pinterest for free, along with over 70 others. So the agenda for today, we're going to make one of these, but I'm also going to talk you through the options where you might not have as much fabric as I had. This one completely wrapped around, and I'll give you special tips for making sure that you've got capacity to wrap it round nice and neatly. These I've made without a wraparound, so if you have less fabric or a less robust fabric, then I'll show you how to do these as well. But I'm also going to show you how you can get that patchwork effect and create one of these without even having fabric, and just doing a little bit of matting and using a page or an image from a book. The tips for successful patchwork stitching are on the resource sheet, but what I suggest you do is watch the whole video, it's not that long, and then look at these tips again at the end. I'll put this at the end of the video, and I'm also going to talk them through when I do the sewing, because I think that will really help you get the most from your supplies and your skill level and get this beautiful touch me effect. First thing I'm going to do to make one of these is construct the cover, and to do that I'm using, because I've got lots of them and they're free, a simple large used envelope. And as ever, what I need to do to begin with is just tidy it up a little bit. I've got some raised bits here and some unglued bits just here. I really love using any form of envelope that I don't go out and buy. I like upcycling, and this is a fantastic way of doing it. So I'm going to tidy it up and turn it into a cover, but to know what colours to use when I add some of my lining papers, and also when I come to colour it, I think what I need to do is decide on the actual piece of either book page or an image from a printable, if you want to use one of those, and the material that I'm going to use. So let's have a dig in the pot. I've brought a few things along. I've got some really nice images from printables, and they work well. Birds work really well for this project, and you'll see why when we come to do the patchwork. I've also got in here, I've got some words. I'm going to use some of those later as well. But I've also got an image from a book like this. Now this would work as well because you can sew around it, and I have done that on one of the examples because I wanted this to be something where we don't have to use printables. This is the one that I used. I've cut it out as a rectangle and I've sewn around the image. And finally, just to make sure that you can do this without even having a sewing machine, you can, if you want, use faux stitches. So you can create one of these tactile journals. It still has that feel that you want to go up and touch and wonder where those stitches are from. I'm not claiming it's the same as being able to sew, but I did want to say that it's possible to do it that way. So I'll choose my image because it gives me the colours, the colour palette for making the cover, and I think I'll go for, if I go for him, so I've got browns and greens in here, I'll do the lining, and when I come to use a coloured piece of paper on here, I know which colours to choose, so that's what that's about. Right, that's tidy-ish. I've got a few wispy bits on the side. Just trim those off. Doesn't really matter. It'll make life a bit easier. And I'm going to have the window on the inside. Doesn't really matter about that either, but that's the way I do it. And I'm going to fold it in half And at this point, you can decide whether on your journal you want enough depth for there to be a spine of, say, 1/2 centimetre or so, 1/2 centimetre to 1 centimetre. And what that will allow you to do is put more content in. So I added on this one a folding so that I've got a bit more of a flat spine here. On some of them, I decided I didn't really need it, so I've literally just folded the envelope over and I've not added some depth of spine. But I want to show you probably the most, let's say the example with the most technically demanding elements to it, and then we can also make life easy by showing you how I would make these. So relax the effort a little bit and show you the alternatives. So to make this a journal with a little bit of a spine, I need a ruler and a pencil. And I'm just going to mark 1/2 centimetre in on either end, which will mean I've got somewhere to fold to create some depth of spine in the middle here. I've done this before, works really well. So fold that up to the mark I've made. Doesn't matter if it's in blue, it's going to get covered up. Give it a really good squidge down. We need to make that spine very crisp and clear because we're going to use those folds again later. I'll do the same, fold up to the mark. This is just a really simple way of giving myself a 1 centimetre depth, or what's that, about 1/4 inch? 1 centimetre depth of spine, and then I can go for cover. So I will do the inside first, and I like to use not only a Shakespearean book because it has beautiful font, but the paper in this, because it's a thick book, the paper in this one is quite thin, and that works for us because it doesn't interfere as much when we're folding over the spine. I need I need exactly 3 of these. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I've got a front page. I'm going to make a point about that as well. I use these. They're something a bit different, and I'm not going to just cover up something like that. I use these when I don't cover the outside with fabric. I make sure that I incorporate those front chapter pages with the special font at the top here and make it visible so that this image has got something extra to work with using that font. So if I was to make one of these covers without fabric, with just scrapbook paper very simply and sewing over the image, I'd make sure that I've got something a bit special on the front page. So that page would work really, really well for that. However, today we're doing the difficult one. So I wanted 3 pages of that, and I need a little bit of colour on the right hand side. So I'm going to use one of my ready done coloured book pages. I've done this before. I just sit in an evening or when I've got some spare time and use my incredibly cheap, they're called oil pastels, what a joke. They're just really cheap crayons. They'd be great for wax melting as well. And I do quite a lot of green and yellow, but I just basically pick a couple of colours and scribble away, and on each book page I create something that I can use at another point in time to colour coordinate without necessarily using up scrapbook paper, and it feels really nice because we've made it ourselves. So I'm going to take a green and yellow one, and that's going to go on the right hand side. I like the font at the top right with a title, so I want that to show if I can. So I'm going to glue this in with my glue stick, which is running out, and I will get that on there. We're going to go over the window. We don't use it today, you can use them in other projects. I'll link a video down below where I've used the window to good effect when I've made a journal cover. Cover on the left, You can, of course, use scrapbook paper if you want to do this, but I just like using book pages. Cheap, and I think it's a little bit more fun. I don't know why I'm pulling that up. I'm fiddling. I'm going to cover up to the text and just trim the excess off on the side. When I look at a book page and use it in a project like this, I just look at the detail and think, how can I make the most of that and not interfere with the good aspects? So for me, in this example, that means not cutting into these two columns. They look really nice. So it's easier for me to just cover up here and then trim off a little bit on the side, which is what I'm going to do with my scissors. Just be really careful that you don't nick your envelope and make a hole in it at this point. I'll trim the spare off at the bottom as well. Just keep going on your refolding so that you preserve that depth of spine. It'll be easier than waiting till later when you want to fold through about 3 or 4 layers. So that's the inside done. Now I'm going to do the outside, and I do that with just the 2 thin sheets. So I want, again, my title of the chapter to be what's visible up here. And I'll have the same over here. Nice new one to crack into. So I'll get the left-hand side on. So it's good to just flatten that bit down so it doesn't get in the way. I've got a blank bit there. I'm going to go for another sheet so I don't have a blank bit. Put that one on the side. So we're on Richard II. There we go. And I don't want too many layers over the spine. So I'm going to tear that off just to the left of it. If I'm going to put fabric over the spine, I don't need too much in terms of paper layers underneath it. It's just thinking ahead. I'll have this one over so that there's a nice overlap. So the cover's really simple. Trim it off at the bottom again and refold. It's not bad actually. And very simple, we've made the base of the cover. What we want to do now is add a little bit of colour around the border. So around any of the space that's going to be visible. So if you've got fabric going across the whole thing, then you don't need to colour in here. But if you've just got a piece of something here, then obviously we want to colour this in the same colour palette as well. And we had green and brown in our image, but it is an opportunity to pick images and really pull out the colours that go with that and in that image. I really enjoyed making these. So I've got teal. I've picked the really what was a smoky blue in the image, and I've really pulled it out using different colours, something a bit of a change from vintage neutrals and the dark browns or the pale browns that we tend to see. And on this one I even went a little bit grungy. I've got some gold coming through in that image, and I put the gold into the border along with some, I think it was black. And for each of these you could use paint, you could use pencils. I've been using, here we go, quite orange in this one. I've been using my little Brian paint sticks. They're cheap children's paint sticks from Amazon. I've just put them into a box, and today what I'll do is mix maybe 2 or 3, a brown, let's have a green, and the gold that gets used an awful lot. I've got some water, and I'm just going to go around the edge because I'm going to use as my background. I know I'm very lucky, but I have got a sumptuous collection of pieces of upholstery fabric. I'm not suggesting you need to have these or that you're likely to have them. I know that. I managed to get my hands on these and I just needed to do something incredibly special with them. And this is my best attempt so far. So if I take one of these, but you don't have to have fabric wrapping around these, you can still get the patchwork effect without fabric, and that's really important. So I'll pick one of these. Let's just give ourselves a little bit of ooh ah. How amazing are they? And they're just such fantastic colours for this time of year. In fact, they go from the rusty colours that I've been using through to what could very much be much more festive. And I think using it this way on the journal just makes you get not only a touch me want to feel journal, but something that's got that really high-end luxury feel. I absolutely love it. So I'm going to use this one. I don't mind that it's got, I don't know if you can see, little holes on the side here where the staples came out of they're collected together, they're stapled together in the sample book. So I'm going to use that and that little bird image. So maybe I want orange in here as well. I think there's a bit of orange needed. I take my water, probably should have something behind this, and one of the sticks. I don't want it to go too dark with the brown, but maybe just get some of that water on and go around. When I've done a few of these, I've noticed I've been a bit heavy-handed with the dark colour, and you end up with just a single type of colour. You can't differentiate between the different colours. They all just merge into one because you're trying to lighten it by putting a lot more on it. I'm going to go in with the orange. It's really nice and bright, isn't it? And what we're doing by putting that book page in the middle that was already coloured with our chosen colour palette, and then making intentional decisions about colour on the outside, we're just bringing the journal into a bit more of a coordinated feel. All adds to the loveliness of it. Bit of green here. I'm guessing where this will finish so that these colours will cover the area. Obviously, if you've not got something covering here, cover the whole of the back. Get your paints out and have a play. Shall we put that down and have a look? Yes, lovely, and I've not gone too heavy with the dark brown. So what I need to do now is just set that aside to dry, and what I'm going to do is all of the techniques, share all the techniques and actually do the sewing of one of these, attaching the image and talking through the tips for creating the patchwork effect. And then I'm going to show you how I filled it so that you've got that squidge effect and that lovely touch me feel. So to create the patchwork cover and then sew it, I firstly need to attach them. If you're not going to sew, then I would suggest using a good strong glue, maybe something like Fabri-Tac. But I'm going to just position them, and in fact I probably don't even want the glue to go perfectly to the edge because I'm going to sew there and I want to keep the glue off my needle. I'll get some on, a light amount. Decide what sort of collage image you want. So I'm going to sit him on there, not covering up too much of that number 20. And I've made my own little words. I chose a font that I liked and I printed it in a smallish size because these journals using the envelope are relatively small. I'm going to sew around that as well On this one, I don't know if you can see, I've got a bit more of that, just a dash of the gold. I showed it to you on this little girl. Can you see some of that? It's just picking it up. I'll just share how I did that. It's a little bit different for me. I was very kindly sent a collection of items from Stamperia. And this is called Stardust Metallic Pigment. I got one in gold and I got one in silver, and I couldn't resist having a go at the gold. What I did, I didn't read the instructions, so I didn't really know what I was meant to do with it. I like to just experiment. I took a page of images and my big chubby glue stick, and with a light hand I rubbed across it. So I'm really not putting a great deal on, and I'm not being too smart about covering all of the image either. They're just partially covered. I had a little accident actually when I opened it, and that was partly why I did all of this. So open it very carefully and don't do what I did and open it upside down. I took a brush, so maybe a big loose brush, and I dusted that over the lightly glued images. As you move your brush over, you can feel the glue just attaching itself to the brush. It's just a little bit of it, and this is just a very short diversion. Took my finger and just rubbed it. I think this is meant to go on wax, you know, when you make your little wax discs that go on the back of an envelope, but I just love the effect. And then I just cut a few out, and see, probably showing better on the overhead camera. Look at that. Gave me a little bit of that luxury effect, which I think works incredibly well along with the fabric. And really it was the combination of that with the fabric that I thought was absolutely stunning. So thank you Stamperia for sending me that. So I've got one of those behind here. I'm going to stick that on. Let's get that down. Just make whatever image you want. And if you don't feel like doing too much detail when you're sewing or using faux stitching, then use a rectangular image. Don't use one that's got quite so many corners to go round. So these are a lot faster because you're getting an effect from the nice wiggly lines of sewing, and there's probably a bit less to do here in sewing, but it's also a lot faster to cut these out. So actually these were really wonderful to do, as was the one just from a book page. So that's on there. If you want to, you can take a black pen and just do faux stitching around here, and it'll save you sewing, or you can do both. So now I've got my cover ready to sew. I'm going to put that through my sewing machine. I'm going to sew around the whole thing first, and then I'm going to do the patchwork style stitching. And what I'll do is I'll show you me actually sewing. We'll do this one, but I want to just share those tips that are on the resource sheet about how to do the patchwork style sewing. And you may already know this, but by trial and error I found that I got a bit of a technique that I think has got a better aesthetic appeal. What I'll also do is tell you where I sew, either for those where you want these which are actually a pocket on the front, but particularly how I retain capacity in the fabric as it goes around the side here, which means that when you come to fill it, and this is really important, it goes with and around the envelope, not pulling it. When I did my first one, which I think was this, you can see that the fabric's a bit tight and it's just pulling here. So this is pulling up a bit, and I don't like that. So I have a special technique for adding a bit more capacity on the spine, and I'll show you that as I do the sewing. Right, I've got you in front of me, and I'm going to do a sew all the way around and then do the patchwork stitching on the little bird. So I've just sewn around it. So now I'm ready to attach the image with stitches to the fabric. So I'm going to just share those tips for sewing in a patchwork style. So my paper patchwork tips come from having a little bit of a practice really, and not always getting it right. I start by sewing around the border of the image and any of those other extra little labels that are put behind. So start by sewing around the perimeter. And then when you meet a change in colour, perhaps where the wing meets the body of the bird, or you meet the image, that little label behind, just feel free to change course direction and follow one of those lines. Using forward and reverse stitching is great because I think it gives that authenticity. And don't worry if any of your lines are wiggly, because not only is it okay, it adds that real effect. I really like adding the label behind because it adds layers. So paper layers on the front gives your image a bit more interest. And I think it does help if you sew within the image as well. But one key point that I think helps a lot is to not sew across a face. So if you have a bird, for example, don't sew across the eye, don't sew across the face. Go down to the point of the beak and back again. I use a dark brown thread because that makes it a little bit more visible, and I think it's a bit less harsh than black. If you're not sewing, a white gel pen is an alternative. And I use a relatively short stitch because that does help when you're going around corners, but not so short as to just get holes in your paper. I'll just quickly go around my letter here, my word, to make that stand out. But I think what I'm going to do before is give it some faux stitches and then stitch on top. So I've just stitched around the word journal. I did go around it with a fine tipped felt pen to start with, and then I've added the stitching and I've got a lovely complementary patchwork effect. So I think this works really well. So now what I need to do is attach this to the cover, which I hope has dried, and I want to show you how to do that, as I mentioned, to get that beautiful flush effect, but with enough space to add as many pages and decorative items of ephemera inside the journal as you want. To sew this fabric on all the way around, I'm going to sew 2 U-shaped sets of lines. So I'm going to sew a U shape here and then a U shape around the spine. So I thought it'd be useful just to give you the picture. So if this is the cover, this is the envelope that's been covered. We have a spine in the middle that's about 1 centimetre width. I'm going to sew the fabric on with a U shape here, just in running stitch, and then I'm going to sew just either side of the spine, down here, meet where I've sewn before, sew across and sew up again. And I'll do that using a small stick to add capacity so that when we fold this around, we've got enough capacity in the spine area for this to sit flush and not pull. It'll all become abundantly clear. So I've sewn this on with a running stitch. So I just started on the front here. I held it, I didn't even have it with a bulldog clip. I just literally went around and sewed it relatively flat and finished at the top left here. And what it gives me, because we've not sewn across the top here, is when we're finished we'll have a pocket here and a pocket here. And obviously from the original envelope we've got pocket to come, 2 pockets to come in there. So now what I want to do is that little technique around the spine here. So I can see where my spine is from the folds that we kept doing on the cover. I'm going to take my foot and put the foot just to the side of the spine and the needle over the start, the edge there. And I'm going to use this line of sight down to the spine that reappears underneath the cover here, just so I can try and get a straight enough line as I sew. When I meet the sewing line on the bottom here, I know that I need to turn the corner. And now I'm going to take just a narrow stick, so I think it's like a kebab stick from the kitchen, and I'm going to put that in here. I might have the blunt end actually in here, and hold it butt up. You can see it just appearing, I think, here, just underneath there, and what it does is says I need a bit of capacity here on the spine as I sew this over. Rotate it, keep the stick in, and then sew on the other side of it. Take your stick out and let's see what we've got. I think it makes a big difference. So the pull is, well, basically we've got a bit of capacity here on the spine, and it makes it so much easier to fold that round and ask the fabric to just roll around the spine. It made a big difference on my examples. There was something wrong in that first one. So now what I need to do, having done all of that, is just share a couple of other tips with you about those other examples that I've made without wrapping the fabric around, and then I'll show you the finished item where I've decorated it with complementary elements that go in the pockets. I've added a signature, and I just wanted to do a quick page turn of that. So for the other examples where we didn't wrap around, I've just done a single U-shaped bit of sewing around here, and I've got my pocket on the front here. So there's space in there, and it's the same on these others. Those are the wraparounds as before. Obviously on this one I couldn't preserve the pocket shape, so I have sewn all the way around it. I don't get a pocket, and because I've sewn into it, I've actually closed the pocket there. But if you don't put anything on the back, you have got a pocket just here on the inside of your envelope. So these are easier, I would say, because you haven't got the wraparound issue and using the stick. But if you do want to put your fabric all the way around, I think the stick and sewing that way just really does help. I think the colours on this one are absolutely fantastic. So having made our cover, what we can do is fill it. I added about 8 sheets of paper to mine, and I bound in the signature with a very simple figure of 8 pamphlet stitch in a complementary colour of embroidery thread that I just have near my desk. It went through the fabric pretty easily. I was a bit concerned that that might be tough, but it wasn't too bad at all. And I left the sewing element, so I tied it off in the middle rather than, as I typically do, is have it dangling on the outside. I think having it flush on this one is really, really nice. It means that your attention is to the rest of the journal. So all you need to do now is just have fun decorating it and filling the pockets with whatever you want. And I thought I would just do a little page turn of the one that I've done here. And if you've enjoyed this video, then why not click on this one, Mastering the Art of Collage Cards, and make them with and without printables again. I think you'd really enjoy it, and I really do hope to see you soon.